in the quest for healthy longevity, if we all had access to that starting material, and we've all had access to replacement parts, off-the-shelf replacement parts, conceivably all of the degenerative diseases that plague us in life could be eradicated. Hey everybody, I'm Dr. Bob Hariri from Piloting Health, and I'm on location here at the Abundance 360 longevity trip with my good friend Andrew Hessel. Andrew and I have both been part of the faculty at this conference, where we're talking about breakthroughs that impact the field of longevity, performance-based medicine, genomics, et cetera. And I wanted to revisit with Andrew, who's been with us on Piloting Health in the past, some of the cool concepts he's fascinated by, driven by, and he and I have been kind of speculating what might exist in the future. So Andrew, welcome back. And can you share with everybody some of the things we've been talking about here at the Abundance 360 conference? And what is really exciting you, and where are you going to spend the next decade of your life focused on?
Oh, well, I just shared some of the incredible advances happening with digital biology, which is we're seeing across the board acceleration of our ability to manipulate biological systems. I think this has huge implications for longevity, for health in general, for diagnostics, and as we discussed today in the meeting, it just opens up avenues that we couldn't even possibly imagine even a couple of decades ago. So it's going to bring in millions of more minds to the biological space, and we're going to see a huge amount of engineering.
With the advent of AI and the fact that AI and genomics and longevity biology are all developing kind of in parallel, the crossover and the influence of AI on the biological fields is inevitable. So can you explain to the audience some of your concepts around the banking, the concept of, creating a way to preserve and reserve not only your assets, but your biological assets as well?
Yeah, this has really been something that I've been putting a lot of time and attention towards because I at one point in my life, I ran a biobank. It was for microbial strains, but we had thousands and thousands of them. Today, what I'm seeing this potential for is that we're starting to move to digital biobanking for organisms that we can print on demand. Today, that's in the next few years, that will encompass pretty much every microbe. But for organisms that we can't build from scratch, we have to physically bank them. It's not something that we think about, but if we bank our biology, which is as simple as a tube of blood, and we start to bank money attached to those cells, and we start to bank data attached to those cells, we essentially create a personal biobank, a personal repository, and I think it's a huge asset. And it doesn't have to be just our cells. It can be the other people in our family, the plants and animals that surround us. Anything we want to preserve biologically, we can. And biobanking as an asset has not been well explored yet.
Yeah. You know that for 30 years, I've been in the world of biobanking. I started my company Cellularity around the concept that cells that could be recovered after birth were incredibly valuable. They were, in essence, I always say, your cells at the moment of birth are about in their perfect, pristine shape after going through nature's quality control process. And so we have, we've banked tens of thousands of donors and tens of thousands of private banked individuals. And some of these cells have been in cryopreservation for almost 30 years. We've been able to use those in some cases to treat different diseases, but obviously the long-term payoff is when these become a platform for organogenesis, immunotherapy, and what you and I both care a lot about, sort of the longevity therapeutics to enhance and preserve your human performance as you age.
Absolutely.
And I love your concept that, if you think about it, banking assets is fundamental now to the mindset of the average individual. They bank their money, they bank their memories. With anyone with a cellular phone, has a reserve of tremendous amounts of information in the form of digital data that's banked away, right? We put it on the cloud, we keep it on flash drives, et cetera. How do you marry them all together? Because I know that's what's driving you kind of forward, is the concept of banking all these things.
Well, that's just it. Like, I have 2 young kids, and there's terabytes of information that we've collected on them already. This is a new paradigm, and as our lives get more and more digital, we're going to collect even more data. And I think this is a digital asset that we shouldn't be giving away. Where more and more people are recognizing, oh, we've given it to Google, we've given it to Facebook and other groups, but now it's time to kind of collect that data for ourselves, preserve it, and attach it to for our families and our lives. And again, longevity is something we should all be striving for. Good health is something we should all be striving for. But what I really love is this opens the door to true biological persistence, because I am a huge fan these days of cloning. I've always cloned microbes.
Yeah.
Now we're able to digitally clone microbes. I've come out of my shell and said I want to be cloned, because I know no matter how well I take care of myself, I'm going to expire. It's inevitable. And so I love the idea of bringing a twin brother back in the future and having them born into abundance with essentially an owner's manual for their body.
Right.
And really just have another life cycle, Bob.
Yeah. I mean, listen, that has always intrigued me. In fact, for all the people who bank their newborn cells, they're keeping basically starting material to recreate that individual, right? I mean, the bottom line is it's the offspring cells themselves that are preserved in perfect, pristine form that can be called upon at a later point to generate more progeny, and in many cases create an entire new organism.
Yes. Yeah. And so I'm encouraging more people to explore biobanking. I'd love to see biobanking go mainstream for adults. I'd love, for us to understand the potentials that this opens up for health and longevity, and for persistence.
Explain to the audience just how identical clones are. People have this, I guess this notion, a science fiction kind of notion, that a clone is so completely aberrant from the origins that there's some nefarious intent behind cloning, that there are some risks behind it. Explain what cloning is and what it really means, because people don't even understand that identical twins are in fact clones of one another.
Yeah, identical twins are clones. They're just born at the same time. So the only difference with a clone is they're time separated. There's a lot of movies about cloning, and there's a lot of people's perceptions are really shaped by stories and science fiction. But really, a clone starts off just as an embryo. We take an egg, we transplant a somatic nucleus into the egg, so it's got a full genetic complement that's identical, that's taken from the individual. We put it into the egg, we activate it, and you start growing a new baby. The procedure looks almost entirely like IVF, except there's a little bit more manipulation in the lab before the embryo is implanted. Well, you can't get away from having a mother. You always will have a mother. A clone will have a mother that carries the baby. It can be a surrogate. It can be a mother for life. It really depends on what ends up happening. Cloning isn't considered ethical or legal today, but it's probably happened.
Yeah.
And it certainly will happen in the future.
Explain that, because I think the audience would be intrigued to know. The technology is relatively straightforward.
Very.
And it doesn't require a level of sophisticated infrastructure to perform. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked about this. It's fascinating, but very rudimentary biological know-how can actually get you to being able to do this.
Yeah, again, there's no genetic manipulation in cloning other than taking a pristine nucleus and putting it into an egg.
So
So
tell people you can actually pull a nucleus, just the nucleus, out of a cell.
yeah, microsurgery.
Yeah.
It's done with a special microscope and pipetting system, but you literally pluck out a nucleus and inject it into the egg. You remove the egg's pronucleus, half nucleus complement first.
Yeah.
And that procedure is becoming, it can be even automated if you wanted to do it at scale. So making embryos and eggs are, I believe will soon be in abundant supply because of a process that's already been proven in rodents and is coming to humans called in vitro gametogenesis, turning essentially cells into eggs at scale.
Right.
So making a clone is technically not that difficult. Again, there's no genetic manipulation. You will get a identical twin born at a different time. So you get to gift them your life experience and knowledge and potentially assets and other benefits.
So if you think about it, right? If you were able to life extend by preserving yourself and then reappearing in a cloned form in the future, but all the assets created in your lifetime today were carried along with you, right? The benefit of compound interest.
That's right. Yeah,
So
you would be born into abundance. You would have. I tend to look at the clone and the mother as a unit,
right.
Because it's still going to be a family. They may have another partner as well, but again, it's a typical family. It's a baby. There's nothing strange about that. They're going to be born and have a very different life than the original, but. But they'll have a biological understanding second to none.
Now, what about the concept? You know that at Cellularity and our LifeBank cell banking service business, where we've banked many tens of thousands of donors and private individuals, but done at the moment of birth. We've just launched the ability for adults to bank their own cells. And from something as simple as a blood collection, kind of equivalent if you're going to donate a unit of blood in the blood bank, we can isolate cells, including stem cells, and those cells can obviously be cryopreserved for the future, but they also can serve as potentially a source of that nucleus that could go into the egg carrier, if you will, and voila, you can clone.
Absolutely. In fact, it should be possible to make eggs from your own cells.
Right.
So, like the process, I think will become quite. But let's just hold on the topic of adult cell banking. This is something that I think should go mainstream.
Yeah.
We should be banking ourselves early, banking ourselves often, because this is going to open up more and more opportunities for health and longevity. And again, if and when cloning is legal, I expect it in the future, that's an option.
Yeah.
There's not a requirement. Ultimately, these tissues are yours.
Yeah.
These cells are yours, and how you permission them is extremely important.
And it's important to be thinking ahead. So taking advantage of the ability to bank today. For example, our Life Bank program for newborns is one service opportunity. What we call our bio backup program, where you're basically conceiving of backing up your own biology by collecting your cells, processing and storing them. Those cells can serve in a whole variety of applications. For example, they are a platform for developing immunotherapies. In other words, if you may not need CAR T therapy today, but having your cells banked away before you actually become ill gives you a tremendous leg up on being able to access immunotherapies like CAR T therapy for cancer or autoimmune disease and so on. That's one element. And then there's so much going on in organogenesis work. Our friend Martine Rothblatt and her team at United Therapeutics are building organs from basically stem populations for transplantation. That'll mean that in the future, if you need a kidney or a liver or a heart or whatnot, you may be able to use your own cells to repopulate a template to create a transplantable organ. People need to understand that's possible.
Absolutely. And I think this is, and really you want to make organs from your own cells. No rejection, no drugs.
Right.
It's really the only way we should be doing transplants.
I mean, look, if we all had, in the quest for healthy longevity, if we all had access to that starting material. And we've all had access to replacement parts, off-the-shelf replacement parts. Conceivably, all of the degenerative diseases that plague us in life could be eradicated. So,
I couldn't agree with you more, Bob.
so let's give the audience kind of an understanding of where you envision this across a range of assets, the how you programatize this so that you're banking biology, you're banking assets, you're banking data and information.
Yeah, so all of those are pretty straightforward, and there's various levels of service that you can bring to it. I've been speaking with wealth managers because already they take care of a family's assets.
Right.
I just look at biology as being one more of those assets. So the we banking the biology is fairly straightforward, but we have to have the right agreements and permissions for those cells. You have to basically make it part of your living will and your trust. Banking money is it doesn't take that much because again we can think really long term
Right.
here, and of course it's your money, but you want to make sure that when you expire, the money stays attached to those cells. Those cells are a cryopreserved, portion of you. They are a part of you. And so, there's certain agreements and relationships that have to be set up there. But we've already seen new products like Revival Trust for people that are trying to bank their whole bodies or heads with Alcor.
Right.
This would be not so much. It would be a type of revival trust. You want it tax sheltered, and you want it attached to those cells. And of course you want to bank information. And that's almost the trickier one today because where can you trust that the information is going to be secure?
Right.
You want to collect as much information. So how people are managing their digital assets today is really important, but we want to make sure that they're preserved indefinitely.
Interestingly, I wonder if there's an underlying legal thesis here which says that if you undertake this process, you are not subject to the typical punitive estate taxation which occurs at end of life, right? In other words, if you're actually providing a runway forward where your life continues, would that allow you to bypass some of the very punitive estate taxation which steals our wealth after we created it?
That's something you'd have to discuss with professionals in that area. But I think
There's a hell of a case for doing it.
I think it's an interesting. I think a portion of these funds should be untaxed because they're essentially an extension of your biological life.
If you think about the returns people get on the S&P, for example, if you put money away today and you know that it is going to be left just simply to generate interest over a prolonged period of time, you can calculate what the value will be downstream.
Absolutely. In fact, the first person to kind of do this was Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin set up these perpetual trusts. Actually, they weren't perpetual. They were bounded. 200 years. And so he took £1,000. The U.S. dollar hadn't even been created yet,
right.
And he donated it to two cities. I believe it was Philadelphia and Boston. And he made no allowances for management of that money, but
right.
he said, look, you can lend this money out at 5% annual interest, and over after 100 years, I think it would work out to like somewhere around £130,000.
Right.
Let's just switch to dollars, about $130,000. And he said, you can take 70% of that and use it for whatever you wish. And the 30% will be reinvested for the next 100 years, and that'll turn into millions of dollars. And so it was interesting. There is a fascinating article in Lapin's Quarterly, I believe, called Trust Issues, where people inspired by Ben Franklin set up essentially trusts that would go on for 1,000 years and seeded it with more money, and they turned into financial time bombs. So they literally they compound to insane levels.
Right.
And so they realized we have to shut down these perpetual trusts. But now they're starting to come back in certain regions, and of course, they can't be able to grow indefinitely, but they're fascinating.
It's interesting. The broad reaching implications of being able to put yourself in suspended animation while other things continue on. The mechanisms of compounded interest, et cetera, actually creates some very interesting potential implications, even so insofar as how it impacts family wealth transfer, family wealth preservation, and so on. It's fascinating stuff. We need to next time you and I need to bring a banker and a trust attorney on here with us.
Yes. And in fact, I've got a friend who is knowledgeable in these areas, and he's put up his hand and said, let's work together on this.
Well, I often say, there's a certain level of wealth, right? And we all know that there's a community of multi-billionaires out there. That community reaches a point where even the most irresponsible spending, they can't consume their wealth in a year. And so what happens is their wealth will continue to grow the longer they're alive, which gives them an incentive to invest in anything which is going to allow them to live healthier, longer lives. So longevity is particularly important to people who can have a calculated growth to beyond being trillionaires in the foreseeable future. Those folks need to be investing heavily in the technologies you and I care about.
I absolutely agree. And I think if they're really thinking long term, they should be investing heavily in understanding the biological basis of memory. Yeah. And also brain-computer interfaces. We've seen tremendous advancements there just in the last few years, and those will only continue. Have you ever met Ramez Nam?
No.
He's a fascinating, brilliant mind, but he wrote a series of books, science fiction books, to really drive home the idea of brain-computer interfaces. The first book was called Nexus, and it's basically just a drug that puts in I like to think of it as cell phones for our cells that just go into the brain, and it gives you your brain's direct access to digital information, as well as give digital tools direct access to what's happening in your cellular biology. I love that idea. So cell phones for cells, I believe, are coming.
I love it. I love it. Well, look, as always, you fascinate me. You fascinate our audience. Looking forward to continuing this discussion. But you and I need to get to work. We need to kind of reduce this down
to practice.
To practice, yeah. Right? And so on the heels of Cellularity's adult cell banking program, which we've just launched, after 25 years of history doing this for newborns quite successfully with remarkable utility to that asset, the future is only going to get more exciting as we begin to think of how you deploy this in some of these really long-term models. So, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me again. Again, everybody, this is Dr. Bob Hariri from Piloting Health with another interesting discussion with my friend Andrew Hessel, and we look forward to coming back and explaining to you how you can bank your biology, your assets, and your data, maybe forever. Thank you very much.